Shut up, compressor. Hey everyone, Matt here with Duke's Models, and welcome back to the A-6 Intruder build. Now that we have the fuselage closed and the wings on and all that stuff, it's time to turn our attention to the literal belly of the beast. Now this is where we're going to get to pay the piper for a lot of the focus on fit and everything that we've had sort of all around it. You know, especially up here with the radome and top fuselage and the wings and all that stuff. Because there are so many different elements coming together, they all kind of compound right here and create a bit of a pain in the ass. So, where are we at so far? Well, I've got the engines glued in, and as we walk through, I've hacked them off. They're kind of pointless. I went ahead and took a piece of black poster board and cut a circle out of it and glued it here so that when you kind of look down the hole, in the odd chance that you see anything, you're not going to see like daylight poking through or any of that bullshit. So basically just a disc like this, nothing fancy. And let's go ahead and place one on the other side as well. I don't see any need to paint this far down because the exhaust sit at a weird angle anyway, and it's honestly even hard to see past them, much less all the way down the hole. Okay, so there are those. Okay, beyond the install of the engines, I've gone ahead and set it up so that these exhaust cans are removable, so I can paint them, weather them, all that stuff. Come back in later in the build, and literally just seat them back into place. Pretty cool. Now each sort of intake engine thing has 3 cover panels that have to go on. And they essentially have to start at the back, just because you'll see here in a second. So let's go ahead and place this one down. And these fit okay. The one for the other side over here is honestly not that great, and I need to fiddle with the fit a little bit more. But it still kind of gets where it needs to be. So those sit on the back. Then right here, we've got these pieces. This is super interesting because the plane has literally gotten... I also run into this problem often, so we're going to have to figure out something here to keep this from happening. Give me a second. Okay, so I've reclaimed this piece from the dead, and it's just kind of an ongoing pain in the ass with how it fits. Basically, once it's in place, it fits pretty decently. It's just getting it there that's a huge pain in the ass. Alright. Go ahead and do this so it doesn't fall down the hole on us anymore. Come on, come off my finger. Fucking kidding me. Okay. So that one sits there. Then we have a forward piece. And this is the one that was meant to be literally like hinged open like this, so that, or maybe it was the other side. Yeah, hinged open like this so that you can see the engines, and that's just stupid. Anyway, it's supposed to fit on top of these. And this is where we start running into problems because of the intakes and all this shit up here. So yeah, that is not a great fit. And sure, up top it's kind of janky. Where it really starts getting weird is on the sides. Let's see if I can do this. So you can see right there, not a great fit. Part of that is these things, I guess they got pushed back a little bit by something. But there's nowhere to grip, and yeah. Because these have to sit on the back. And the problem is holding it and putting pressure on it with the cockpit here that I don't want to get my fingers into and all that stuff. And I think it might just be literally a matter of getting in here and shaving some of this shit down. Because there's interference right there. Good news is there's going to be a lot of cleanup here anyway, so it doesn't matter all that much. Let's spin this around and look at the other side. Yep. Okay, so the other side, this piece. And I was really thrown at first because I was trying to get this to line up with the gear bay, but it actually sits over. Easy killer. You don't need to go down that hole. This is where kind of fucking around with the fit aft is important because it'll impact everything else. Alright, you're sliding off your post. Stand back up. Come on. See, this one too has, well, not as bad. That's actually gotten much better somehow. Okay, so that side's decent. We have a little bit of work to do, but it looks like stuff that'll kind of go away as we make sure that everything fits up properly. So yeah, a lot of work to do here, and having the lack of a good stable platform is a bit of a challenge. Maybe I need to put together my 1/32 scale vertigo stand and use that for this, because this is just crazy. But the mission here is to make all of these things fit with the minimum amount of filler, and then to come in and impose our will on these little areas right here, basically just south of the crew ladders, where the intakes are. This one goes together okay. This one kind of does. But there's this overlap that we have to deal with. So, yeah, that is our mission. Okay, so coming back to it, I think I've got this side worked out. Basically, what needed to happen was on this leading edge of this forward cover plate, I basically needed to come in and sand down this edge a bit to clear just this all this shit properly, and also basically hack back a little bit because there was a bunch of edging in here, kind of like what you can see right here. That's not really important because, I mean, there's a limit to how far it can go, and so if everything's interfering, we have problems. So I'm going to go ahead and close these two up. Hell, let's go ahead and set this in place as well. So that means that we are good to, at least on this side, start gluing some shit down. Now that we've got that kind of tacked in place, we can go ahead and pull out the exhaust. Basically fit this side a bit more firmly. While we're waiting for that part to set up, something else is kind of cool. This is the inner pylon, and I again need to fill that fucking random rectangular hole. But we've basically got these two little holes drilled here, right? Look at how well that seats. That's just wonderful. So I'm thinking I might use that as a template, drill a few more holes, and mount it with magnets and pins. So we can kind of remove it and keep coming in and out, in and out, in and out as we paint, weather, install ordnance, and all that good stuff. Okay, we're going to let that sit for a few minutes, and we'll come back and keep on going. Okay, so I got all the panels glued in place, and for the most part, it's not terrible. I'm not going to say it's great, though, either. Fortunately, a lot of this is on the bottom, and the worst of it is hidden in a trench that's going to be buried basically between the actual humps themselves and a not small tank and the gear bay doors up here. So for the most part, a lot of this stuff's going to be really buried and not all that accessible. We still need to get in here and do a little bit of cleanup anyway. So let me zoom in just a little bit. Okay, so starting up front, we've still got essentially some crud in here and in here that need to be cleaned up and filled. These little arrow things, we need to fill those in, especially on this side. I already knew I would have to fill in essentially where the crew ladder goes, and so that's going to extend quite a ways up here with this nice awesome seam. Yeah, and then we need to get back here along the doors as well. This door actually sits a little bit kind of underneath the crew ladder intake area, so we're going to need to sort of rationalize those two together. And then we've got a few gaps in the doors themselves up here, which shouldn't be that big of a deal. So move sort of down the back. We've got this longer thing back here that definitely needs a bit of filling. The one on the other side is better, but it's still not great. And then on the outside of it, it's got some issues with sitting proud right in here. So yeah, cleanup is going to be a blast. then while we're looking at all the fun stuff that we have to do, so let's take a look. Back here at the avionics door, we need to fill in essentially right here and a little bit of area over here. We need to clean up this whole mess of shit right here. Then we come way up front, if I can push this far. There we go. The area around the radome still needs help too. So I've sanded down a bunch on this side and it's still got a little bit of a lip. So I'm going to try to rebuild a bit of that up with some putty, sort of maybe along the actual turret frame itself. Come on, focus. Same on this side, but it's not as bad on this side. This side is a pretty flush fit. And as you can see, it's gotten some rough sanding so far, but nothing too evil. We also need to go in here and fill the actual radome gap that I knew was going to be there pretty much all along. But that one is easy. I'm not even really concerned about it compared to the rest. So that's what we're looking at. So to start filling in some of these gaps, I've been installing styrene shims. You can see there's one here, there's these right in here, there's one here, one here, one here. Got one back here by this exhaust where it didn't seem to quite close all the way. And I've started baking them in along the radome as well. And this little thing here to sort of restore the distance between the radome and the turret housing, basically to make them equal on either side. So it's going. Generally, these things, I find it works best to let them set up for a while before I really start attacking them. So all that I've done is glue them in with extra thin and then come in and trim them a little bit. Except for this one, which I actually sunk to basically the required depth. Now, frustratingly, I can't seem to do that up here because there's a pin in the middle. And whenever I cross that pin and try to, maybe just put something over here instead, it just falls in. So we've got a couple little shards of styrene floating around inside the intruder now. But stuff's progressing, and once this sets up, I'm going to go back and start the real cleanup. Alright, so I've gone ahead and gotten a few things done off camera. Basically, all the shims that I installed out of evergreen styrene in various shapes and forms, here, 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 all up here. I've gone ahead and basically chiseled those down with this thing and sanded them flush and all that. And I've honestly been kind of dreading having to clean up this area just because it's a bit of a mess. But then I got to looking around at the reference photos I have for this area, and I realized something amazing, which is there are no rivets at all. So it's tough to see from this angle, but if you look, for example, at this little ridge between sort of the panel area right here just aft of the crew access ladder and this part of the cover, they don't really line up, and that's problematic. And it's also a factor over here as well. But because there are no rivets, that means all these get filled. I don't have to worry about destroying the detail there. I am worried about destroying the detail right over here because it does actually show up. But because there are no rivets on these things, that means I can basically just remove all those. And then I can build essentially a putty ramp to get the contours right. So, yay. It means probably more work, but less difficult work because I hate rescribing shit. So, I'm going to go ahead and get to this, and I'm not going to film it because, let's be honest, it's really boring watching somebody put putty on shit, right? I'll probably pop in every now and then as I'm going and just keep everyone updated on sort of the progress of it all, but hopefully when we come back to full-on step-by-step building, this part will be taken care of. Okay, so it's been a fun night of dealing with putty. Yay! And we've got all the rivets covered, all these little stripes, and we've also started building up the putty ramps to level off with the intake sides here right by the crew ladder. So this stuff pretty much needs an evening to cure up so I can come in and start sanding it, and RIP my sanding sticks. So I'm going to leave it, and we will return tomorrow, or for those of you watching the video, in moments. Okay, so I hope that the sanding is complete. I'm going to almost guarantee you it's not. There are certainly going to be areas where we're going to need to come in here and do some touch-ups, and probably do a little bit of additional putty and things like that. However, for the most part, we're in a pretty decent spot. Places I'm worried about most are honestly right up here, where the intake engine cover things meet the actual curve here of the intake around the crew ladder. Specifically more on this side, because there's this little access hatch that is visible that we cannot destroy. So trying to maintain that curve and all that is a bit tricky. We've also got the radome up here, which I think is looking pretty good. And then if I swing this puppy around to the top, we'll start with the tail, come in, and everything looks pretty decent up here. I think these little areas right on top of the intakes are going to need additional attention. And then these areas right back here where that little aft insert from assembly kind of stuck in a little bit. God, I don't know what the opposite of proud is in this case. Humble? I don't know, but they're sunk in a little bit compared to the rest of the fuselage. So I've built them up with some putty. We'll see if that actually works or not, or if I need to go in there and do additional cleanup. But it is time to do a little bit of test spraying, just to see how things are coming. So for that, we've got the good old Moto MK12. I don't want to go too crazy, so I'm going to keep the PS267 in action, because this is essentially spot priming. One thing about the radome and kind of the rest of the kit is the plastic in some places is a little bit grainy. It's got a little bit of a texture to it, and so need to make sure we knock that down before the main paint starts going on. And that can be done with a mix of sanding as well as primer, and sanding the primer down and then repriming, just to knock down all the high spots. We've also no doubt got some sanding scratches in here, and my awesome thumbprint that we need to somehow erase. I think I've already done most of that. Got an interesting thing going on here where in some places it looks like there's some rivet showing through, and other places it looks like it's more of a sheen difference between, or I guess a texture difference between the plastic and the filler. It's really interesting. But there are definitely some areas where the rivets still show through, which, fuck. Knew would happen. Okay, so touch-up areas. The underside of the radome, this side of the radome turret housing thing. We've got a few here on the place where the intakes meet the crew ladder area. These areas are actually looking okay. As we get back here, some of the rivets need a bit more attention. They're just very, very slightly showing, which I don't mind a little bit, but I don't want a whole bunch. There are some here where they're just inconsistent, where it's like filled, 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 not filled, not filled. Those need touching up. Other than that, I think the underside is decent, at least as far as these panels go. Back here it gets a bit rougher. Some of these just didn't work out very well at all. Others have this weird sheen variance thing happening, which I'm not quite sure what to make of that. Because when you hit them, they definitely vanish, and then they kind of come back again a little bit, but they just come back as little shiny dots, not as depressions. Just odd. Centerline area here needs a shitload of work. It's not pretty. And then as we flip this guy over, centerline here needs basically another round of filler, another round of sanding, and then it should be good. The radome, probably in the same boat. They're just areas that are going to need additional attention and love to really pull off. I actually think, for the most part, what we have going on in the wing roots works pretty well. So, all in all, I would call this about a 70% success, which is pretty solid. Now I'm going to kind of let this hang out overnight, and we'll come back and we'll tackle it again tomorrow. Okay, so the 3M Super Red is a great putty, but when it comes to things like centerline seams and stuff like that, its covering power is definitely a little bit diminished compared to some other putties out there. And so to hopefully knock out the radome and the center fuselage and things like that, I've gone ahead and used some Combi spot putty. This stuff dries super fast, almost too fast to really work with effectively, but it has really good covering ability, sands well, and feathers out nicely. So my goal is to be able to hopefully sand this down and be able to call it done, at least these parts of it. So I've got big old Infinity 400 grit soft sponge thingy. Some water over here. We're too big to really dip into it, but that's what fingers are for, right? Scooch it forward a little bit so it's sitting on the intakes as opposed to on the nose. Holding this thing is the real fun. So that's looking pretty solid. Still feel a little bit of ridginess going on, so I think we need something a little bit blockier. And we have it. Come on. Okay, so I imagine you get what's going on here. I'm sanding shit. I'm going to work my way from 400 down to 600, 1,000, etc. And pick back up here shortly once we've got some sanding done. Okay, so the Combi putty did a pretty solid job up here on the nose, it looks like. I think everything is pretty well sorted there. And I particularly like, let's see if I can turn it here, the way that it handled the turret mount right here. This was sort of a depression, and basically I put some tape across the top, so like right on the dividing line, and then just puttied in here and sanded it smooth. And tomorrow I'm going to come in and put another tape line right on the bottom line there, and put another line of putty there, and then that should have us looking pretty good on the radome, I think. Unless there's, stuff breaking through here that I'm not seeing right now, which there very well might be. On the dorsal spine of the fuselage here, the Combi didn't do quite as well, or at least I don't think it did. I saw a couple little spots in here where maybe I sanded a bit too aggressively. So what it is, I came in with some VMS-CA and a little bit of dental acrylic powder. Laid that down and then sanded the ever-living shit out of it because I gotta hate sanding CA. But it is now a nice smooth join. And it doesn't matter all that much because there's going to be non-skid stuff up here. So, hoorah. Okay. What's next? Okay, so I'm doing a really shitty job of showing the sanding because it's really boring, and honestly I want to listen to audiobooks and stuff while I'm doing that. But just to keep everyone appraised of where things are. So basically, after I went ahead and did all the cleanup and sprayed all the shit and everything, it's time to come back through and do more cleanup. And as you can see, we've got some combi putty sort of right here on the intake. We've also got combi putty basically along various places where we had some gaps and rivets still showing up and things like that. So those all got treated, and we're about to sand those down. Also used some Magic Sculpt, which is it's basically like epoxy sculpt or Milliput, but in my experience now, it seems much friendlier to work with than those things are. It reduces with water, or it cleans up easier with water. It doesn't seem quite as sticky in the hands. It seems a little bit more pliant. But basically, I dropped some of that here in these little deltas, right in that little tiny crevice in there that I can't get to otherwise. I've also used it on the forward edge of the crew ladder area, and most of this will be pretty well hidden. Basically the actual hinge door sits kind of down here, and so it'll be obscuring most of the bottom. Then you've got the steps and things like that in here, so there's going to be enough going on that I think I got it close enough. I also used a different color Milliput or Magic Sculpt to get basically most of this area clean. I still need to come in here and sand this part down. I just legitimately forgot to last night, and now I'm like, oh fuck, that's going to be fun. The other big deal is over here on this side of the radome. You can see the underside here that I've already hit with combi putty and then sanded. Last night I taped that over and did the radome side, and so now I need to sand that back as well. So that's kind of my missions for tonight. Okay, so I've got all the sanding done, and now it's time to check things with some Mr. Surfacer. Now I'm not sure if this is 1000 or 1000 primer surfacer or what, because I did not label the jars very well. But it's one of those, and either one will do the job that we want. Again, I apologize for the size of this beast. It makes showing this on camera not super easy. But the reason that I want the 1000 whatever is to cover off some of these sanding scratches, because polishing this thing out would take for fucking ever. And it takes a shocking amount of this stuff to do the right coverage. Holy shit. Okay, I'm not going to make everybody watch this.